bag up here. Although the study is in there.
No, I don't think you need to refer. Do you need to refer to the study? I'll take. You keep your phone. I'll take your pass.
Okay, take my pass
I've got it.
and I'll keep my phone.
Yep, you keep your phone.
Yeah, I don't need my badge up here. And they told me, they said second. Where do they look? Second from where? What time? Is this your computer? That's Duriel. So that means.
You guys ready? Yes. No, we're missing one person.
Let me do this.
Okay. Dante.
Clint, just tell me.
Where's Duriel?
This is going to be a good panel. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to the 2025 Annual Conference and Book Fair in Los Angeles, California for AWP. I am Daryl Alejandro Holness, a member of the AWP Board of Directors. I am an Afro-Panamanian black man with a fuchsia tie and a wedding ring. And I'm 5'11" and a half. So, the Association of Writers and Writing Programs is a small but mighty nonprofit organization that amplifies the voices of writers and the academic programs and organizations that serve them, all while championing diversity and excellence in creative writing. I'm a member of AWP's Board of Directors, but first and foremost, I'm a member of AWP. Membership with AWP provides me with writing resources year-round, but just as importantly, it allows me to support other writers, especially those who are just starting out. My membership dues help writers find meaningful careers and publication opportunities, and make services like the Writer-to-Writer Mentorship Program possible. If you aren't already, I invite you to become a member today. We are delighted to bring you this event today. I'd like to acknowledge and thank all of our conference sponsors and the literary partner hosting this event, Canem. Our literary partners and sponsors allow AWP to present these extraordinary literary events and help us keep our conference affordable and accessible. Please join me in thanking all of our conference sponsors and partners for their support and participation. Now, before we start, I do need to do some brief housekeeping. Please silence your cell phones. Remember, there is no flash photography allowed during the presentation. Respect seats marked as reserved for attendees with accessibility needs. Please give the authors about 10 minutes after the presentation to get to the book signing table before approaching them to have your book signed. Thank you. And now, it's my great pleasure, as a Canem Fellow myself, to welcome poet and Canem Fellow Clint Smith, who will introduce this fantastic event.
Thank you all so much for being here. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here with these incredible folks on my right. And I'm so grateful that you all have come. You have so many choices about what events to attend. You have so many, it's a sort of marathon of opportunities. You could be taking a nap in your hotel room, or you could be taking a break watching Love is Blind on Netflix, but you are here, and we are grateful. I am going to introduce the folks on my right, and then we will transition to Lisa Willis providing a sort of overview of the report that we are here to delve into and to celebrate. On the far right is Mark McBride, the director of Ithaca S&R, where he leads strategic portfolios that address critical challenges in higher education and cultural heritage. His work includes research into collections and infrastructure dynamics within libraries and cultural organizations, initiatives addressing basic student needs, and investigations into organizational structures and open education frameworks. He leads a team of researchers and analysts who investigate how institutions can optimize their organizational strategies and service delivery models. His collaborative approach helps institutions develop innovative solutions that enhance their impact and sustainability. Then we have Meta D. Jones, author of Muse is Music, Jazz Poetry from the Harlem Renaissance to Spoken Word, which was awarded honorable mention for the MLA William Sanders Scarborough Prize. Jones's current manuscript, Black Alchemy, is a hybrid genre of poetry, theory, and memoir that explores collaborations between writers and visual artists as they map memories of and travels within the African diaspora. Jones' creative scholarship focuses on African American literature and interarts, and has been published in diverse venues. Jones's research and writing has been supported by fellowships from the National Humanities Center, the Harvard University, the Moreland Spigern Center at Howard University, the Rockefeller, Woodrow Wilson, and Mellon Foundations, as well as the Carter G. Woodson Institute. Then we have Lisa Willis, the artistic administrator and creative space maker with over 20 years of experience managing multidisciplinary projects in the nonprofit and commercial arts sectors. She has led various roles for New York Live Arts, Contemporaneous, Thresh, and others. In 2020, she co-founded LinList, a listserv and grant writing support service for New York City artists and nonprofits. She is engaged in expanding the research needed to inform cultural and social progress, including serving as co-principal investigator of the Magnitude and Bond, a field study on Black literary arts service organizations. She was the founding operations manager for Canem Music and holds a BA in music composition and theory from NYU with a background in ballet and modern dance. And finally, we have Duriel E. Harris, a poet, performer, and sound artist, who's the author of No Dictionary of a Living Tongue, Drag, Amnesiac, and is a multi-genre works that include thingification and speleology. Co-founder of the Black Took Collective, she has been a McDowell and Millay Fellow and has received grants from the IAC, Canem, the Rockefeller Brothers Foundation, among others. Her work is published in multiple venues, and Harris holds literature degrees from Yale and NYU, as well as a PhD from the UIC Program for Writers. Awarded the George Garrett Award at AWP 2023. She is a professor of English at Illinois State and editor of The Obsidian. And now we will have Lisa come give us our presentation and tell us a little bit about the Magnitude and Bond report that we're here to discuss.
Hi, let me just pull up our slide deck. In addition to working on the research project, I am also the executive director for Canem. So I'm really excited to be here. This moment is an incredible culmination of 4 years of collective work. I'm going to give a brief highlight of some of the findings and the focus of the study, Magnitude and Bond, a field study on Black literary arts organizations. But before we dive into that in the deeper discussion, I want to answer an important question as to why we are here, why now, why is it important for us to do this study. The reason actually starts in 1740, 1 year after the Stono Rebellion, with the General Assembly of South Carolina's passage of the Negro Act. The law read, "All and every person and persons whatsoever who shall hereafter teach or cause any slave or slaves to be taught to write, or shall use or employ any slave as a scribe in any manner of writing whatsoever hereafter, taught to write, every such person and persons shall, for every such offense, forfeit the sum of 100 pounds current money." That was the beginning of anti-literacy laws in the United States, which were passed to prevent any person of African descent, free or enslaved, from learning how to read or write. There were many acts of Black resistance before and after the Negro Act, but the Stono Rebellion, which took place 1 year earlier, was the largest rebellion of the colonial era And it was particularly feared and unique because its leader, Jimmy, who's also known in some documents as Caddo, was an enslaved man who could read. The resulting impact of that rebellion was the criminalization of literacy on a culturally specific basis, which brings us to the reason for the study. The first reason that we're doing this study is because it's never been done before. To our knowledge, to date, there has not been a study or any research material on Black literary arts organizations or an assessment on culturally specific literary organizations serving communities of colors. If you have not watched Nikki Finney's 2011 National Book Award in Poetry Acceptance speech, I highly encourage you to run, not walk, to YouTube to take it in. In her speech, she references a statement from the theologian and ethicist Dr. Canem, whose statement here is one of the inspirations behind our commissioning of this research project, where she said to Nikki, Black people were the only people in the United States who have a history of being explicitly forbidden to become literate. Which brings me to the importance of magnitude and bond. The legacy of the Negro Act and all that came after that in terms of prohibiting our interaction with the art of letters is what makes Black literary arts organizations unique. It's the reason why 285 years later, we are here today talking about the importance of the study and our work as Black literary arts organizations. There are three goals that are guiding this work. One is that we want to bring greater visibility to the operational realities that Black literary arts organizations are facing. We also want to encourage broader thinking around changing the norm with regards to access to resources, and we want to bridge the gap between organizational leadership and funders for the support of more sustainable operational models. So many hands make light work. This is a collective effort. The collaboration is between Canem and Ithaca S&R, who has served as our research partner. The research team includes myself, Deirdre Harkins, Liam Sweeney, who are the co-writers, and Sheila Patterson, who is also a Canem fellow. We had two literary experts, and at the center of the study is a collective of 5 Black literary organizations who do work together under the title Getting Word, but whose directors have served as advisors and the case study working group for this research project. The name Magnitude and Bind comes from the Paul Robeson poem by Gwendolyn Brooks. We have the full poem here. It comes from the last section of it. An important part of this project is wanting to just raise awareness. And so while the organizations that are at the center of the study are just 5 organizations that are in the Black literary community, we do represent a larger ecosystem of plural literacies and institutional formats with both informal and formal networks, all providing literary arts services to the community. We name those who make up that legacy in the report. It's at the end of the actual field report, and we are celebrating them as part of the dissemination of this research. I highly encourage you to take, I think everyone has a postcard with a QR code. If you visit the link to our website, we have an executive summary. At the end of the executive summary, we have a list of names and organizations that make up Black literary organizing past to present. And we just want to acknowledge that we are part of a larger community. So let's go back again in time. This time we're going to go to 1872, which is the defunding of the Freedmen's Bureau. The Freedmen's Bureau was an important institution post-emancipation that provided transitional support for formerly enslaved people, abandoned lands, white people who were impacted by the Civil War, and most importantly, it provided schools, teachers, and resources in response to the demand and need for education by the Black community. That ended in 1872. Just a few years later, there was the withdrawal of the federal troops in 1877, which took away that provisioning of safe space and security. And those two incidents really mark the start of institutional support being invested and then withdrawn from making reparative investments to even the playing field for our community. And those reversals really ushered pressure to create community-based solutions for the cultivation of literary practice and the provisioning of safe spaces for Black people and ultimately for people of color. It's important for me and for us to acknowledge that though the legal access to the written word was restored post-emancipation for Black people, it does not mean our participation in the written word and literary organizing were not taking place prior to that. And as Dr. Harris often says, we have a long history of having to be strategically visible so that our existence can continue in spite of the circumstances. So, as mentioned, at the center of the study is a group of 5 Black literary organizations. Those organizations include Canem, Obsidian, Furious Flower, the Hurston Wright Organization, and, sorry, can't see where I am. The Watering Hole. We represent 140 years of work in the literary community. We came together after the summer of 2020, 148 years after the dissolution of the Freedmen's Bureau. The summer, as you know, when there was kind of sudden interest in supporting Black literary output. People were buying books, they were buying products made by Black makers, supporting Black businesses, and we saw that the financial resources were not being dispersed equitably during that time, even though Canem saw kind of a bump during that summer. Other organizations in our community did not necessarily see the same. So at the end of 2020, we convened our 4 sister organizations and kind of formally came together in 2021. We practice cooperative economics and the principles of unity. We meet regularly with our primary output being a fundraising and awareness building campaign that runs annually between the 2 Independence Day, Juneteenth and July 4th. Any and all proceeds that come in from that campaign are equitably dispersed. And the idea was that it would be a proactive response to the interest in our community the year before and a continued advocacy for sustained support. Okay, as part of our research report, there were 4 research questions. They were developed with input from the directors of Getting Word. These are our 4 questions that are answered in the full study. Our process also includes quantitative data, qualitative in the form of interviews, and additional research. We have a very extensive bibliography that's connected to the desk research that's also available on our website, and all of those contributed to the content that the research team referred to in writing this report. So let's get into a few of the key findings, with the most important one just situating ourselves as we relate to the larger literary community. So as you see here, there's roughly $500 billion in charitable giving in the United States. Most of those dollars go to research and social causes. Of that $500 billion, which includes individual donations, institutions, federal funding, state, city, $25 billion roughly is going to arts and culture. Most of that $25 billion is taken up by large arts institutions, specifically museums and performing arts centers. Negligible is the amount that goes to the literary field. We do know that via independent research conducted by arts administrator and consultant Jen Banka, that roughly 2 to 4% of that amount is going to the literary field. So roughly 500 million of the 500 billion is going to the literary field, making the literary field the least funded of all artistic disciplines, with the entire field operating within a collective budget that is basically equivalent to a single large art museum here in the United States. Which brings us to the collective. So we collected the information that you see here in 2023. It's based on a 5-year period, 2018 to 2022. It's our data in aggregate and showing kind of the breakdown of our budgets and the resources that are supporting us. And you should notice something significant is missing here, and that is institutional funding. And that's because even when collecting our data in the aggregate, support from institutional funders was not significant enough to register as its own categories.
Wow.
The two main categories of support you see here are government funding and support from individuals. We already know in our current climate, kind of the state of government funding, how vulnerable we are. And I think many of us know as administrators how challenging it is to cultivate individual donors. Black and other culturally specific organizations are in the center of the target when it comes to the issues with federal funding and the DEI advancements now in question. And I just wanted to give an example of sort of the precarity of individual donors from the window into Canem. So June 1 to September 30th, 2020, when everyone was kind of suddenly very interested in supporting our efforts, we saw 141 individuals that gave to Canem. These are individuals that never had given to the organization before and seemingly were responding to the fervor of the social unrest at the time. The following year, 9 of the 141, 13 renewed their funding a year later.
Wow.
9 a year after that, 7 after that, and we've not seen any of them since. And that's Canem, who's has a development team, has a bit of a larger institutional footprint. So you can imagine what that is for other sister organizations who maybe didn't even see those donations or saw them in a larger form, and of course that has since dissipated. So just a few of the findings from the report I'm going to highlight here. Just the importance of one of the pearls of Black innovation, of course, is making a way out of no way. It's important for people to know that Black literacy in America really has built the foundation for much of the collective organizing that social justice movements benefit from and continue to advance today. Black literary organizations are really dynamic spaces that, again, as Dr. Harris has pointed out, naturally operate with a high level of tension with the status quo. We are able to be flexible, we are responsive and adaptive in a way that is not common elsewhere, and we serve a very critical role in community building, safe space making, and advancing equity. The formation of getting word really is a powerful act of resilience, and it is an example of the impact cooperative organizing can result in. So even with the disparity in resourcing, this group has been meeting for now 5 years. We have been able to organize an annual fundraiser. We've been able to share those resources equitably. We've been able to contribute meaningfully to the field in terms of research, all without support. All without admin support, but just on kind of the sheer demonstration of creativity and how we can work together in more sustainable ways. Another important finding is this kind of chronic issue of underemployment that we all are facing in the literary field, but is particularly intense in the Black literary space. So one of the findings is that most of the employees within the organizations are working on a part-time basis, and to just drill down even further, it was observed that roughly 40% of the leadership positions are fulfilled through volunteer arrangements. And I opened with us, saying that our 5 organizations organizations represent 140 years of service, and almost half of our leaders are working on a volunteer basis. So nothing surprising to us who are in the field. The lights are on because someone is on fire, but this heavy reliance on unpaid labor is really indicative of a larger, more systemic challenge, resulting in Black sites, a profound cultural influence, and essential spaces for the public good, continuing to be driven by a disturbing centuries-long pattern of unpaid labor. Unpaid labor that is largely being carried out by Black women, as it is all Black women who are leading the organizations in getting word. Of particular concern at this moment in connection with finding number 3 is that many of the historic Black literary organizations and operations today have their founding in and shortly after the Black arts movement, which means their founders, who are now becoming our elders, are in many cases now approaching their 70s and 80s, serving as the lone wolves, holding down historic institutions where succession planning and material resources are essential for the preservation of these spaces. We can do a show of hands, and I already kind of know what the answer is going to be. How many folks are interested in running an organization with little to no staff and no pay? There's not a long line, which brings me to some of the important points that we want to make sure are taken away, which is that we really need to accelerate the urgency around resourcing these organizations so that they can continue to be sustained and evolve with dignity and material resources to do so. When there's under-resourcing at large, as is the case for the literary field, it is hyper-magnetized for those of us who are impacted by intersecting disparities. Princeton professor Eddie Claude Jr. has a very poignant observation on the important role Black institutions have in bearing the weight of assaults on equity, access, and identity, and I just want to read a quote that he has on that. He says, "Black social networks, Black institutions, Black civil society, they are like barrier islands. Those barrier islands break up the winds of the hurricanes. They hold off the headwinds of the storms of this country. They protect us from those headwinds. And even if we do get hit by those storms, we do not get hit with their full force. That's because we are the front line. We are carrying hundreds of years of learned adaptive strategies for surviving in the space of exclusionary institutional practices, under-resourcing, and hostility. Black literary organizations and institutions are very valuable thought partners and models for creative and alternative solutions for repair and resilience. I hope you will make some time to read the full study and its related resources. I'm looking forward to the conversation we're about to dive into. Thank you for your time.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Thank you so much, Lisa. That was
Stunning.
such a profound, moving, unsettling, and eye-opening and revelatory sort of examination and presentation of a report that, again, I encourage everyone to read. It was transformative for me to read. It was incredibly revelatory, and I think it informs. It both provides, as Lisa's presentation did, important historical context to understand the contemporary landscape of Black literary organizations, but I think there is something for all organizations to pull from this report, as many of the struggles and experiences are overlapping in many ways. Before we get started with the conversation, Meta is going to share a poem with us.
Yes, I'll stand. Thank you, Clint, and thank you. I will say a bit about this poem. The lovely thing about being at AWP is I don't have to define what a Cinto is. But all of the language in the word store from this poem is taken from Lisa Willis, Your Forward. And so I thought it was really important for us to have Black literary organizations that emphasize poetry, especially amongst the categories of literary, to have that language be engaged with you and in conversation through the poetic. So the title of it is Study the Magnitude, Secure the Bond. Or, if you like the chiasmic, Study the Bond, Secure the Magnitude. After Lisa Willis, Executive Director of Canem's Forward. We are are. We are magnitude and bond. Poets, witness, document, historic, the Black experience. Poetry at the front. How we survive? Collective, uplift, enables, mission and work and work and work and work and work. Secrete the secret of our survival. Black literary arts, the organ. The iambic, unstressed stress, unstressed stress, unstressed stress challenges. Despite disparities and lack, Black arts continue. Black art, restructure, our word, our world, create, practice, continue this access to power. No, not only power amends. Access to educate, to mend individuals. No, empower the collective. African, American, co-labor, collaborate, construct, critical, writers, nurturing, preservation, serve, persevere, roots, resources, pay, getting word, Black literature for Black liberation, cultivation, the legacy, the tradition, our community, sustain the urgency, ensure the longevity. We are magnitude, word and bond. Thank you.
It's the blessing and the curse of letting incredible poets go before a conversation, because I'm tempted to be like, well, that's it, everybody.
No.
Thank you so much for that incredible
you,
work.
Lisa.
I think I'd like to begin where you began the sort of presentation of the work, which is understanding the sort of larger historical context from which Black literary organizations exist, and what does it mean socially, politically, historically for these organizations to exist in a tradition as part of a lineage of people who were systemically prevented from having access to reading, to writing, to knowledge. How do you, Lisa, we can begin with you, how do you conceive of the sort of social importance of this organization given the histories from which they emerge?
The social importance is that our organizations are in constant tension and fight with just the right to participate in the field. And it's a historic legacy, and the importance of having collective spaces to address the need to fight against that is really vital to supporting the writers that are in the space. And our organizations really have come about as a need for there to be a mission that is there collectively to address just the environment that our writers are operating within, because we know that there's precarity and there's challenges within the field, but to be a Black writer, you are participating in an art form in a field that this country has a history of both legally and in practice saying we have no right to be in. So that's the importance.
Yeah, and Duriel, how do you, in your time in this space, how have you seen the sort of landscape change and shift and evolve in ways maybe that are that reveal progress, and maybe in ways that reveal a lack of progress?
Hi, baby. Well, thanks, Clint, for that question. We were just talking about this a little bit earlier, and there's something very compelling about having a Black public sphere that is functioning, right? And we don't have that anymore. And it's not by accident, right? So the importance of having the report of having these organizations after having, you know, Armageddon done already come, right? The end of the world has come, because the end of the world was when my ancestors were captured, kidnapped, and brought across the sea. Some of them died, et cetera, you know, and then here they are. So the world was already over. So we are constantly rebuilding a world. So part of that is the import of not needing to ask for permission to continue, not needing to depend upon forces that are hostile to our existence to define the narrative that structures our realities, right? So that was the importance of a lot of what we were doing when we had segregation, right? It wasn't that, and this is what my father has taught me, it wasn't that we wanted to be with the white people. My parents are from Arkansas. I'm the only person born in the North, right? Mother was a sharecropper until she was 12. He said, you know, and he had to explain this to the folks at IBM who asked him. He was the only Black employee. They were talking. They didn't consult him first. Then he didn't say anything. They said, well, Clint, what do you think? He said, it's not that we want to be with you. We want to have new books, right? What happens when you build a new school, then we get the old building. You get new books, we get the old books. You get new furniture, we get the old furniture. Right? So it is not that we cannot make it. It is literally that it's difficult, but not impossible for us to make it with that foot on our neck, with that knee on our neck, right? Somehow we continue, and we continue by connecting, we continue by drawing from our ancestors and from our own knowledge in the flesh, right? So that thing of saying, you hear Toni Morrison saying, yonder there, they do not love your flesh. Love it hard, because the flesh itself, we were talking about this yesterday, is the archive. In the flesh, we have knowledge that can interrupt and disrupt, right? These narratives that are they're attempting to impose upon us to make us small and make us think that we have no place. They don't simply, they either want our labor, right? Because you think about it, back in the day, when we had enslavement, the difficulty was like, oh, you don't want to kill your slaves because you need them to work. And you know that they're people because you give them lots of responsibility, right? Okay, but then let's have emancipation. Now it's time to hang them from trees. Why? Because their bodies are theirs, right? Before, our creativity every day was used in the service of capital for those other folks. Then when we get out and we can use it in service of ourselves, they want to kill us. Okay? And so that's part of the reason to undo the Black public sphere and try to get you to this place of post-Blackness and all of that. Because it's like, oh, this is valuable. We can make money off of this. We can, every time. That essay by Erica Honey, it still doesn't get old.
No, it does not.
Politics of co-optation, every time trying to find a way to use that creativity that you have in the service of someone else, because they are the capitalists and we are the bodies.
Meta, how do you sort of situate your work, yourself, within the sort of, what does it mean for that work to exist in the sort of ecosystem of Black literary spaces? What does it mean for that work to exist amid the sort of the collective as we've defined it here, but also the sort of broader collective of contemporary Black literature? Like, can you talk a little bit about what it means to be doing this work, what it would mean to do this work in isolation relative to what it means to do this work in the context of said community?
Certainly, thank you, Clint. So 2 things I'll say. One is a historical, and I love following you, Duriel, in part because you set up both the conditions for pessimism and the reason for, the word you used, Clint, was exist. I'm going to alchemize it and say to persist, right? The reason when we should, and there's so many conditions to be pessimistic, right? Even the ones in your report, right? In terms of, the funding drop or the donation drop from 141 to 9 to none, right? After a period of years. But to situate my work, I will say that when I wrote The Muses' Music, it didn't start out as a book, it started out as a dissertation. I could not write a dissertation at Stanford on Black literary arts organizations. I would not have been able to get a PhD studying poetry specifically and American literature, and I couldn't get a PhD in African American literature there, right? But what I could do was write a dissertation about a tradition that already was acknowledged by PWIs that existed: jazz, poetry, blues, hip hop. And so to situate where we are now and how we exist, I did what I love about this study is back then I fancied myself like a young, modern version of Zora Neale Hurston trying to study the heads of Canem, which back then was like, it was only like 6 years old then, but I was like so blown away by what it was doing then that I wanted to understand what made it tick. And so I would situate Black literary arts organizations first through the forms and the genres, because I'd situate it through the work, the creative work, the practice of the work, right? That enables us to have things to study, to have things to create, to have things to archive. And then I would back up from that and say, you branch from the micro of not just the product, which becomes capital, but the process and the production, which is the liberated Black imagination that cannot be contained, which is why I loved in the report when you had that quote from Nikki Finney, right? The line that's often quoted from that 2011 speech is both that South Carolina slave code and then the We Begin with History. But you go a few lines later and she's like, the king's and the queen's English trying to control what never can be controlled. What? The imagination, right? And so what I would argue is that at the time when I was doing that as a literary study that ended up just in a chapter in a book, I didn't know, I couldn't have imagined where Canem would be. I couldn't have imagined Duriel taking up the helm after NC State, after Sheila with Obsidian. I couldn't have imagined what the future of a pandemic with Black literary arts organizations or Black writers in general might look like. But what I could see by also writing about things like the Darkroom Collective is what you all index in this report. I could see from doing interviews with poets then who were just finishing their first books then, or their second, right, like way back then, what it meant to have an organization peter out, right? And I knew I felt uncomfortable with some of the language of, well, it's because, they were at UMass Amherst and at Harvard and they moved on to other things. That wasn't satisfying to me as an answer of why that particular organization, for example, from some people would say, well, of course, and so what I would say now, I think that because organizations like Cave Canem, and Obsidian, started with limited to no resources other than the resource of the fire that keeps the lights on, like you said. I would situate, excuse me, and I keep thinking of since the report also goes back to the New Negro Renaissance, that short-lived fire literary journal that we all know about. There's something powerful in the fact of making a way out of no way that Black creatives and Black arts organizations model for us. And the powerful thing that would make us pessimistic can make us optimistic because of what you said. We have shown not that we should continually have to do more with less and make a way out of no way, but we have mapped that a way is still possible. And so even in this climate, if you would ask where I would situate, I refuse to, I have a pragmatic optimism, I'll say, instead of, not a Pollyannish optimism, but I refuse to sit even in this moment of dismantling, right, in despair, right? If I was in despair, I would have canceled coming to this panel. I'm just really, it's a, why do it? So does that speak to your question?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And Mark, you know, kind of jumping off that, we are, as Lisa kind of mentioned at in the midst of the report, and you know, it's these harrowing numbers going from 144 to 0, and then also we are quite conspicuously in this moment where federal funding is being slashed at an unsettling rate, and we know that the federal funding and also this sort of trickle-down impact of federal funding being cut and this sort of onslaught of executive orders and the ways in which that impacts what states are going to do or universities are going to do because of the fear that they have of having their federal funding cut. So this sort of cascading impact of anticipatory cuts and actual cuts that have been made. And we know that they are targeting organizations that do racial justice, racial liberation work in the arts, economically, politically. So given the work you do with organizations and given your understanding of the context of this moment, how do organizations like those within the collective begin to position themselves or situate themselves or prepare themselves for what the next several years or what the future broadly is going to look like amid a hostile political environment, knowing that we've always, to some degree, been operating in a hostile philanthropic and political environment, or at least one that has been conditionally supportive. But are there ways to think about what the preparation for the sort of new political era we're moving into, how that impacts these organizations?
Well, I'm glad you gave me an easy question.
No, glad I don't have it.
What are the answers, Mark?
More prayer. You know, this study for Ithaca SNR meant something to us. And, you know, when we do studies, you know, we start by doing a literature review, a desk research. Let's get to know the history. Let's spend some time in that history archive and find out what the truth was. So we grounded ourselves in there, and it was heavy, but it wasn't our history, so to speak. But we had to sit with it because we are part of that history. And as we've worked our way through this report, it wasn't just a research study. It was a journey for us and the team. And you know, you bring yourself wholly to a project like this. You can't do like, I'm gonna put my toe into this. Like, you are fully in it because they are fully in it. And so going through this experience and feeling the love, the passion, the joy, the terror of the history, when we were hitting print I thought it was going to stay in the past. But hitting print feels like present. And so I don't have answers. Lisa and I had lunch the other day and we were talking about this. And, you know, being positioned inside the dominant culture, you know, the one thing I think Deirdre, Liam, and I probably learned is that resilience is going to be the key for all of us moving forward. Knowing that our organization, you know, we rely on federal funding, we rely on institutions, we rely on so many organizations to do the work that we want to see done, and we want to be able to help them to succeed in that work. But right now, that work is becoming increasingly harder to do, which means that it's more important to do now than ever before. So the answer I have is, I don't know. But persist and exist. And learn from the path that's been laid out by so many others.
Thank you for that. This question's for both Deirdre and Lisa. How do you, given what Mark just shared and given what we know about the difficulties of the financial and philanthropic landscape, how do Black organizations navigate the tension that exists in cultivating relationships with philanthropic partners and potential individual donors, foundations, and also maintaining a commitment, like an ethical and moral commitment to a set of principles that are mindful of all of the history that we've talked about, which is to say, when you are having, are there sort of lines in the like specific, like we don't engage with people who do this sort of work, or we won't accept money from these sorts of organizations or people with these types of ideological backgrounds. And I ask this in the context of it being a tension that has existed for Black artists throughout history, right? I mean, we can go back to, all of the abolitionists, some of good faith, some of more pernicious sort of opportunism that supported many of the formerly enslaved folks who wrote memoirs, and they might have had their own ideas about what purpose said memoirs would serve. You can go back to the Harlem Renaissance and think about the white benefactors who supported folks like Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston and the like. And so it's not that this is new, but I guess I'm curious, as folks who lead these organizations, how do you think about navigating that tension, especially, again, now that we're in a moment where our organizations and organizations across the country will be potentially be even more in need of support than they have in a long time?
Well, my answer to this question is going to, I think, also be the same for the question you asked, Mark, which is I believe our organizations do already know how to weather the times, because as much as we say these times are new, in my view, they're not new. The difference is that there's a tension and discourse and a sense of urgency in the dominant culture because it has affected their sense of stability, but these times are not new. I'm only 1 or 2 generations removed from my family losing its farm from being burned down by the KKK. I'm 1 generation away from both my parents integrated their medical schools. They were the first Black people admitted to their medical school programs. So this is not new. It's just on camera, and live and in
Yeah.
mainstream. So there's that. And in terms of navigating the tensions, I think, as you know, as the report was saying, and some of the highlights, we already have the adaptive strategies. These sources of support weren't supporting us anyway, and they haven't been for several hundred years. And so this idea of philanthropy is changing in the nonprofit culture, and we're actually seeing it collapse because this idea of giving is changing with the new generation. But philanthropy has been happening in the Black community ever since we've been here, and particularly in the area of individual donors and kind of collective giving. And so I think we already have the practices of cultivating resources with those ideals in place. And actually, the dominant culture has a lot to learn from us in terms of what it means to advocate for resources that are material or otherwise in a non-extractive way. The last thing I want to say about this that I think is really important for us to know, as much energy as we can put into talking about the norms needing to be changed, the reality is that the institutional landscape is not set up to support our institutions. We're here because Canem and the organizations that are in this case study are visible in a way that's considered legitimate in this country. But our legitimacy that allows us to be visible as business institutions doesn't mean that there's sister organizations that are in our community who are not still institutions. So, I mean, there's a larger set of work that needs to happen on the philanthropic institutional side in terms of their structures being able to recognize our institutions as being able to receive large dollars and to receive the amounts that we need and to answer us when we call. In absence of that work, I think our way forward really has been this. So it's coming together in that kind of assault on Black institutions. For those of us who are here, really digging in and really making a lot of noise so that individuals understand. If you have $100 to go spend on your basketball tickets or whatever. Why can't you give $10 to the organizations that are here that support you that you will miss if we are not here? It will change the quality of your life if we are not here. So that's where for me as a leader, I'm putting my energy into and no, not operating from a place of despair or fear or any of that, because we know how to move forward.
Oh, and you meant me? Okay. Yeah, I mean, I completely concur with what Lisa's saying. And, part of what I heard was look to the hills from whence cometh your help. And I was thinking, who helps us? That's who we need to turn to, the people who are our people. And I'm not just talking about, skin folk, I'm talking about the kin folk. And part of it is really through, navigating that tension through authentic presence and engagement. Because why are we here? And when I say here, I don't mean just at AWP. I mean on the planet as living beings, how we move through our existence as beings. Because it's crazy, right? We all die in the end.
Yep.
Right? We just die. So what's the point? So the point is like what we do in that dash, right? So it's like, well, how do we move? What do we create? With whom? Who do we touch? And so I understand, like, it can be difficult at times, especially when things have come through like cancel culture, right? Where it's kind of like, oh, I have talked to other people. I have not been a movement person in my mind. I was like, I don't like organizations because it's too many people, you know what I mean? And there's always somebody's ego and there's always some kind of problem. And that for me came from witnessing people at church.
Right.
Where I was like, oh, see, if this is going on at church, were you supposed to be following what God said and all this? I don't know what I'm going to expect in the world, right? Because yonder there, they do not love my flesh. You're supposed to love my flesh. And this is how you act? I'm good. So I haven't been that organizational person. But then, you know, talking to some advisors who have been, and they say, look, it's for the long haul, right? Your strategy needs to be robust and multi-pronged. You do not cut off your nose to spite your face, right? You look and see, you talk to people, because some people can be talked to. Some people do listen to you. Some people will pick up the phone when you call. So you don't just say, well, to heck with everybody who, no, because if you do that, Black people have been a minority in the United States of America since we got here. How have we survived? If these people wanted to get their guns and kill us all, they could, right? Oh, so, but part of it is that there are other folks who are our kin, who are mission aligned, who are interested in things that are affirming life, who value the earth, who value that work, who know what it is to love and want that love. And they want to be in the presence of that love. They allow themselves to be touched by that love and by that enlightenment and to be transformed, right? But that does require true engagement. You actually have to show up. You have to be vulnerable. You can't just be like, well, I know all the things, and so if you don't do it the way I said, do it, to heck with you, my way or the highway. You actually literally have to say, hey, I don't know, maybe I made a mistake. What were you thinking here? How can we, right? In order to try to make for the forward momentum. Because if we're together, we're on the same team. It's not about Duriel's team. It's not about Lisa by herself. It's not about Meta by Mark, you by yourself. We're all on the same team, the human team, the earth team, all related.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. No, thank you, Duriel. Thanks so much for that. Meta, you know, these organizations serve the plurality of the Black collective. You know, Blackness, as we know, is not homogenous. It is dynamic. It is expansive. It is heterogeneous. How do organizations like Obsidian, like Canem, how do they continue to serve the Black artists with that sense of collectiveness, with a sense of solidarity, while also recognizing that not all Black people are the same, right? They have different politics, they have different backgrounds, they have different sensibilities, they have different facets of their identities. What does it mean for, and Black organizations, I think, are unique in, maybe to other arts organizations, in both feeling at once the collectivity and the heterogeneity. And so what is it, how do you think our organizations can continue to do and serve the sort of both-andedness of that kind of dual reality?
It's a wonderful question, Clint, and I'm going to actually turn to the audience in part to answer it for two reasons. So when I did the Cinto, you know this, Lisa, because you know your words. I took out one word that speaks directly to that question. The line, the Black space experience, as you know in the report, is Black literary arts organizations, the Black American experience. And so when you said our heterogeneity, how do we serve, how do these organizations serve, given the multiplicity of, I mean, some days I'm a Black woman with glasses and I want you to think I read. Other days I'm trying to chill on my grad school days, like, yeah, I didn't have to wear glasses and I can read all of that, right? There are many people inside of this one person, right? But I'm not making it about the me. I use that as an example to say we know that we are not all one thing at the same time across time. So to serve why I turn to the organizations and turn to the audience and answering your question about organizations, I see there Lynn Thompson, I see you, Patricia Smith, I see you, Malika Booker. You are not an American, right? Nor do you claim to be, right? Why am I saying that? The global reach, although the report looks at Hurston Wright Foundation, I actually had, Dante is in the audience, he said, no, we don't need all your slides. I didn't over-prepare. So I had maps where I mapped out and color-coded the locations of the organizations that the report studied. Then I looked at the prizes that were given, the workshops that were given, and color-coded maps that pointed to the reach within and across spaces where even if the organizations aren't in a certain part of Idaho, but someone from Idaho who ended up writing poems and participating in a workshop in Canem that shows our reach. And looking at, which is why I mentioned you, Lynn, looking at what does it mean to give a prize to someone who is from Nigeria, right? What does it mean that Natasha Trethewey getting the first Canem Prize, right? Being really hybrid from New Orleans and the Mississippi Gulf Coast, right? Awards this year for the 2025 Canem Prize, someone whose principal identity racially might be as a biologist, right? If we think about what Brandon's professional occupation is, and who's in Berlin, right? And so when we think about the heterogeneity, that Berlin-esque, pun intended, takes us back to Audre Lorde going, specifically Germany, or to Gwendolyn Brooks going to Russia and report from part 1 in Russia and detailing those travels. And actually, my favorite moment of that, for those who read that report, is when she throws Sonia Sontag some shade, where she is attempting to be the authority on the Black experience to all of Russia. She's like, she's trying to hold court, and she seems to think she knows more about the Black experience than I do, right? And so that's the only moment I would say there are strategic moments when we embrace the Black monumentally, right? When we ally as organizations, when we say, no, Canem's not in competition with Hurston Wright. Hurston Wright's not in competition with Furious Flower. Furious Flower does collaborate with the history of Black writing, right? There are moments, Torch, I was talking to Amanda, I don't know, she may not be here, but I asked her a question in preparation, and I said, I just want to hear from your own words, what was for you the moment when you were like, we need a Black women-centered organization? And she said it was with Canem, not against Canem, but it birthed for her what is possible. Or Duriel, even though I know you're here also as Obsidian, but Black took you and Ronaldo, right? And Dawn Lenny Martin and so forth. The way that you serve is making space across times for the global multiplicity of Blackness and the generic multiplicity of Black literary organizations. And you do not say the smaller scale is lesser, which was beautiful in your report. You made that very clear, that our sistern and our brethren and our gender fluid, however you want to claim them kin, are our kin too, and how they form the organizations, and that's how we serve. We allow for the particularity when it is needed strategically to create. We allow for the global multiplicity and the heterogeneity when it amplifies our voices and includes us. We say, my colleague at UNC, Tyree Day, his North Carolina South is not the same when we say Black Southern writers as Natasha Trethewey's or Jericho Brown's Shreveport South, right? So we make sure that we distill those regional particularities in the work that we do when we're cataloging our organizations and our history, so that we don't have to have scholars come out and do Black Arts West like Danny Whiter did, or the Chicago Black Arts Movement, or this. I love that the report said the New Negro Renaissance and not the Harlem Renaissance, because it's marking a contemporary moment that I do think is different, right? In how writers and scholars and all in the between and the beyond are making sure that we do not elide regionally the representation or globally of who we are and how we are and how we come to be as Black literary arts organizations. Does that get to you? Okay. I know I like to answer a question. I'm not trying to clap. I don't want to dance around your question.
No, you didn't.
Okay.
It was beautiful. I'm scared.
Right? Exactly.
We're running out of time, but Mark, as quickly as you can, one of the things that the report talked about was these organizations sort of the way COVID impacted these organizations, and so the dynamics of in-person gatherings and virtual gatherings and how that impacts how an organization builds a sense of collectivity, how it impacts its finances. Can you just briefly sort of talk a little bit about the way that COVID has shifted organizations like the ones we have here, but also more generally other arts organizations?
Yeah, I mean, if you can learn a lesson in a pandemic, I think these organizations certainly did. You know, and anybody who participates in organizations where community is the heart and the soul understand that being physically with each other is the key. Because you want to feel the presence, right? I want to feel you here with me. And the pandemic pulled us away from that. So we improvised, and these organizations improvised. So they found a path to start offering their programming virtually. And in doing that, they saw the numbers go up. More people were engaging with the organizations. Different people were engaging with the organizations who normally don't engage with the organizations. So if there's a win through COVID, there is a win. Now, when everybody was able to convene again, that started, but the organizations learned something together through the pandemic that the virtual offerings needed to be maintained along with the actual physical presence of the activities. So you have like a hybrid environment now that they exist within, which is something that I think a number of organizations learned through the pandemic, but I think what we learned is that they not only experienced it, but they have also found a way to create within that hybrid environment, which takes on a whole different meaning in the art world, which is a person who tries to live like an artist, but is more of a consumer of the art world. I'll give to Kaveh this year, I promise. It really taught us all how to experience, you know, the world of, you know, literary arts and sound art and, you know, the media arts in a different capacity. It's exciting. Many organizations did this, but I think what we learned in the report is not only did they grow, but they learned, they improvised, and now they have new offerings and new channels, reaching new audiences.
Beautiful. Last question, less than 10 seconds each for each of you. What is the best way for people who are watching, people who will watch, people who are in this room, what is the best way they can support the organizations and the collective? Let's go down the line. Duriel.
Oh, I wrote that down. I said invest. Resources, human, temporal, fiscal, for the long haul, monthly, not off the top like a tithe, but in the spirit of community accountability and the practical strategy of cooperative economics. Yes. Consider what it's worth before it's gone. And do what you can, whatever you can, whenever you can. Donate, volunteer, spread the word, show up as you are able. We, the people, are not the price. The organizations serve us, so reciprocation. It is reciprocity.
Reciprocation.
I don't like it's reciprocal.
Reciprocal.
Reciprocity.
Reciprocity.
I'm putting all the words together at once.
Combo.
Say the word.
Reciprocity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is crucial. And sometimes things die. Death is a natural part of the cycle of life, or they change, because that's the way of time. No one and nothing goes unchanged.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
It's hard to follow. To me, it's acknowledge that we're here and don't take us for granted.
For me, so you don't say stop on anything, I'll keep it in the 10 seconds because I did prepare. Advocacy, 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 advocacy as a form of resource investment. Right?
You know that's a bad word, don't you?
I do. I know I'll be bad.
In the
with my words
DEI
sometimes.
list.
Yes, I know. I just be a bad person with these bad words like advocacy. Because don't assume that because you don't have the big resources that you can't make an impact in investing. Because there are
That's right.
people who may not know you, Clint, right? And I say, here, let me give you how the word is pressed. I know you don't read poetry, but you'll read this because I know you're interested in this particular history.
Okay.
And then you hit them up with, yeah, you know, they really could use, you know, they would Dave Canem could use, like, and then they're more likely to give. I mean, I just even say my family members, when I give them books sometimes of poetry, they're like, that's so nice. And then I'm like, oh, I sometimes give them books of prose, and then they will go back and read a little poetry. But like, I know that's what I really mean by advocacy. Bring in people, I love what you said, Mark, bring in people who may not be people who've engaged with these organizations before. And I think that's one of the ways.
Absolutely. And to Lisa's point, that $10, like,
Yes.
it makes a difference.
It does, exactly.
Mark?
Read the report.
Yes.
Ground yourself in it, feel it, embody it, then engage with the work. It takes on a different meaning. I mean, as an organization, we've evolved from this work. It was a humbling experience.
Beautiful.
We're happy to share it with everyone.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Please give a round of applause to our panelists.
Beautiful, 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 thank you.
And again,
Thank you, I love it.
please read the report. It's an incredible resource, and so much work went into it. Thank you all so much for coming today.
Thank you, and thank you, Clint. That's moderating is for real, because you